every child you have, your personal allowance increases by £3,000.
Instead of giving children sex education and teaching them about same-sex education and whatnot, why don't they teach children how to finance, teach them about loans, teach them about mortgages? Hi guys, and welcome to Logical Politics. I am Khadeja Brown, and with me is
Andrew Wade.
And today we want to talk about something really important, something that is dividing the right and the left, and there doesn't seem to be a very good solution for. What am I talking about? The benefits system, especially when it comes to child benefit. Some people want the cap, other people don't want the cap, and everyone has valid reasons and good arguments. So I am going to hand it over to Andy and we'll see what is the solution that he has.
So you can actually prevent child poverty by coming up with different things, not just abolishing the 2-child benefit cap. Now, a solution that absolutely everyone has agreed with me on is the following. For every child born to a British citizen, we should invest £1,000 into a junior ISA. Then this will get invested, and then on their 18th birthday, you'll have had 18 years of compounding. Right? Compounding is very powerful. You get dividends, you reinvest those dividends, and you're getting dividends on the dividends and your original investment. Age 18, regardless of the financial circumstances that a child was born into, they then have assets that they can then spend either on further education or even just car insurance to get to work. There have also been complaints, obviously, with university fees. People from richer families graduate and they have no debt to pay off, whereas people from families, other families, don't have that money. So people are getting a different start. So this is one thing genuinely on creating equal opportunities, levelling up, that everyone can agree on, that every child born should have £1,000 paid into a junior ISA, and age 18 that can be spent on various things.
Do you know, I really love this idea because when my older boys were born, that was in the early 2000s, both of them were given a child trust fund. It was a government scheme. It was £250 per year, but it only ran for 3 years, unfortunately. And although only for 3 years, the children, when they grew older and it was time, it matured, that trust fund, it came in so handy. My older son invested it in learning how to drive and get his license. My second one wanted to travel and he used that. And I find that such a beautiful way, because whereas sometimes with benefits, parents are irresponsible and they use the money to gamble or to drink alcohol or to just be selfish. In all honesty, a lot of people are selfish with the money and they misuse it. Like what happened with the universal credits. Before, it used to be a different system. The rent used to be paid directly to the landlord. And all of a sudden, they put it in the poor person's hand, who has obviously problems with managing funds, given the fact that we are actually being spread so thinly within all our means, and some people end up using what is supposed to be for rent, for other things, and then they are rendered even poorer.
This is spot on. So that although the child doesn't get that money until they're 18, because it's in the junior ISA, it's protected, and only that child can spend that money. So therefore, if they're, in terms of benefits, some parents are irresponsible with the funds, the child doesn't benefit. But in this way, it's levelling up and the child gets a benefit. What we then need to do to go further, to then inspire young people, is I think the following. We should specify skills that we are short of, or we say that are part of the national infrastructure. Therefore, if you study medicine, for example, we should say, well, you're part of the national infrastructure. You see the junior doctors striking because they finish university without being 100 grand in debt, starting a job with 29 grand a year. We should say, right, we recognise that you're part of the national infrastructure. Once you have graduated, for every year that you work for the NHS, we will pay off 50% of your student fees. However, if you then go on strike, we will stop paying off those student fees. So you incentivize young people, you give them something to aspire to, and you also have the stick there in place to then prevent them from striking in the future, which is what the junior doctors are doing at present.
And I think that would be a good solution for many of the other fields, because let's be honest, striking was a good thing at some point. But all of a sudden, like everything else, it's been taken out of context, and it has become some sort of way that employees or workers of different fields are bullying others who in that way, like the train strikes or the doctor strikes or the God knows what strikes. And instead of this helping to build our economy, it's breaking it down further and dividing us even, and we hold so much resentment. And the problem is the government can deal with this, can handle this. I feel that they have become so against your bog standard person, because if they really cared so much about like, do you ever think that there could be like economy lessons, how to handle your
handle your finances?
Yeah.
Actually, you raised another great point. I spoke about investing to my 13-year-old nephew, and I was teaching him about compounding. You could then also use the junior ISA as a means to teach your child about managing their own money as it comes to maturity, which I don't think I was squandering money because I was legally allowed to drink when I was 18. But this would be a really good way of actually teaching people how to manage their own money.
I think
so there's lots of benefits.
I think also banks. I actually once wrote to HSBC because I didn't. Come on, I'm a shopaholic. Like honestly, like I still have that finance problem. But I wrote to them that when you see someone always going out onto the unarranged overdraft, instead of like constantly sending them these £25 charges, why don't you, as a bank, offer them the ability for them to join a financing course? They could have done that. I think they can do that. But it's just like everyone is ripping at every single person who works and tries hard in the UK. Everyone's ripping at you. The banks are pulling one part, the government is pulling from the other. And you know what? If you're like me and you don't know how to handle your finances, you'll find yourself in some serious debts.
Yeah, and I think it's important to motivate young people early on. I know a great young lad who's 23 years old. He studied economics at university, left university, didn't get a graduate job. He went out, he decided, well, I can still slug it. And then he became an Uber driver. His car insurance for 1 year to be an Uber driver costs £7,000 as a 23-year-old. He's doing the right thing. He's not claiming some mental illness and going on to benefits. He's there, but he had to work 7 days a week. £7,000 is absolutely too much for a young lad setting up his business. It's not maybe the most sophisticated business, but he's showing that willingness to get out there and work. I want people like him to have had some assets aged 18 that they can then start their business like that.
You know what? This is funny you said that. I've always thought that the government, when people complain about certain situations, instead of the government offering a good solution, they offer the exact opposite, and it fires back. And a good example would be insurance. Car insurance for women used to be so much cheaper than men. And then men started complaining that, it's not equal. So instead of bringing the men's insurance down, women's one went right up.
Everything went
and
up. Yeah.
Who's benefiting? Well, the men didn't benefit, but I'll tell you who did. The fat cats in the government. They're the ones who benefited. And we always end up losing. And I think this brings me to a thing that I should have brought up anyway. This is how we need to be, why we need to be united. Our differences and our different ideologies is what allows governments and traitors to abuse us and ridicule us and enslave us. Really, it's modern day slavery. Really,
yeah.
It is, isn't it?
Whereas these things for our youth, I think everyone can agree on, whether you're on the left, centre, or in the right, giving decent aspirations for young people, levelling up. So I think everyone agrees with that. The last one I would say is, I think a big point for me is I don't like the narrative of the current Labour government saying that if you're against abolishing the two-child benefit cap, you want children to live in poverty. That is incorrect, because there are other ways to alleviate child poverty than just abolishing the two-child benefit cap. My recommendation is that, of course, if you want to have a family, you have to work, and it should be linked to work, so you give incentives. We do need more young people in our society. So my recommendation is, for every child you have, your personal allowance increases by £3,000. So if you don't have any children, the first £12,570 you earn is tax-free. If you have a child, then you get £15,570 tax-free. So that having children and the ability to look after them financially is linked to working. At the moment, with the two-child benefit cap being scrapped, that can also create the wrong incentives to certain people.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with you. And I think, so we don't want to lift the cap of the benefit cap, but we want to still build a future for those children. And I think this is a very fair thing. And one last thing that I do want to bring up, although we haven't spoke about it. So instead of giving children sex education and teaching them about same-sex education and whatnot, and whatever Bridget is introducing into school curriculums, why don't they teach children how to finance, teach them about loans, teach them about mortgages and all their bank charges and whatnot, because eventually they will have to deal with all this. And I can honestly say, when I moved out from home and I was 21, oh my God, I just felt like I was dropped in the middle of the ocean. I didn't know how to handle anything, and I was all over the place. So if we want children not to be poor, if we want to give them a very bright future, how about we focus on the finance bit? Because let's be fair, that is the only thing, or the most thing that they will need on a daily basis for the rest of their life.
Absolutely. Great stuff.
Lovely talking to you guys, and bye.
I hope there are some logical solutions.